In this video, I'm going to go through the process of setting up PhpStorm to do plugin development for PocketMine. In the previous video that I did, some of the instructions that were given have become outdated and no longer work with current copies of PocketMine and the tools that are provided by the PocketMine team. So, to get started, there are a couple things that I expect that you've already done. One of those is that you've installed PhpStorm and that you're ready to set up your first project. The next thing that is important is that you have a working copy of Git installed on your system. Typically with Linux and Mac systems, there is a Git binary or program already installed, but for Windows, you have to download a copy from the internet. Git-scm.com is the one that I recommend and currently use. If you click the download link on their webpage and follow through the process of the instructions that are provided, you'll have a working copy of Git on your system that is compatible with PhpStorm. Once you have those things taken care of, the other thing that's really important is that you should be familiar with the process of setting up a PocketMine server. You can do this by going to the PocketMine homepage at pmmp.io and checking their resources link for their documentation. In the documentation is instructions on how to do installations and how to configure the server. And through that process, you'll kind of be familiar enough to where you'll understand how most server owners are setting their systems up and how your plugins should work to some extent within the system. The other thing that's important is the GitHub link from their homepage. This is their repository where they keep all of their source code. We're going to need some of the information from here shortly. So once you have those things ready to go and you're familiar with the process of running a PocketMine server, we need to download Composer. You can get this from getcomposer.org. It's going to be part of the process of installing and setting up our environment. So once you click the download link, scroll down and look for manual downloads, and under this grab whatever the newest version is. I'm going to take 1.8.0 because that's what's available at the current time. From here, then we're going to go to the Jenkins webpage for PocketMine, which is at jenkins.pmmp.io. Some of the tools that are provided here and the things that the PocketMine team provides through Jenkins are things like the PHP binaries and the DevTools plugin that are required for loading your plugins from source code. So, under the aggregate link, which is currently the top one, there are copies here for every operating system, well, most of the primary operating systems. Download whichever one you need. I'm going to take the Windows version. We're going to go back to the home page and check out the PocketMine link. Here you'll find not only a build of the PocketMine server itself, but you'll also find the DevTools plugin that we need. We're not worried about the pre-built PocketMine server because we're going to be using the source code directly, but we do need the DevTools plugin. So once you have those three things, we should be pretty ready to get started. Back with PhpStorm, we want to go ahead and create a new project. This should be located somewhere that has an empty directory with no files already in it. You can see my PocketMine folder here. The .idea folder was created as part of creating the PhpStorm project. Inside the environment, there are a couple of things that we need to have ready. It would be a good idea before you get started with anything else to go into your settings, check under your version control settings for GitHub, and get this portion set up if you have GitHub logins. If you don't, it would be a good idea to get set up with GitHub, but it's not required for this process. The other thing is to go to the Git settings itself and test to make sure that Git is actually working. Once you have those things set up and you know that those are good, click OK, and then click on VCS at the top. We're going to check out from version control, and because we're using Git, we click the Git link. This might look confusing to begin with, but this should be pretty straightforward. we're going to go back to the GitHub page for PocketMine. Remember that you can get there from the home page. Click the clone or download link on the right hand side, and then click the little clipboard icon. And this will copy the web URL for the GitHub repository. You can paste that directly into the URL location. And then here you need to find your project folder. For me, that was PocketMine. And then you need a folder for the PocketMine install itself. This is usually PocketMine-MP. Depending on how many times you've used PhpStorm prior to this, it may automatically fill this in for you. Otherwise, you'll have to fill it in manually. So this is going to clone the repository in a way that doesn't grab all of the modules that we need. It's not a huge problem immediately, because we're going to fix this in another step. However, it is good to know that at the moment, the way that PocketMine currently releases, the version that you're going to get on the master branch is not the stable version. It is a development version that is significantly ahead of the stable versions. So you're typically going to change branches before you start any development process. Once the GitHub repository has been cloned, we're going to check and make sure that the PocketMine repository was properly cloned and that the settings in our environment were set up correctly during the process. So click File, go to Settings, and then click on Version Control. Here you should see PocketMine-MP listed underneath your project directory with the Get VCS in white like this. If you don't have this, that means that something went wrong during the process and you probably need to start your project back over and clone the directory again. Click OK. Now that we have that, the next thing that we need to do is to change branches. Before, whenever I was talking about cloning the repository, I mentioned that a recursive clone is necessary, but we did not do a recursive clone. And the reason that that's the case is because we're going to change branches, and in that process we're going to have to get the submodules that are part of a recursive clone again anyway. So we're going to check out Origin 3.5, which at the moment is the current stable branch. You'll have to choose this based on whatever is stable in the time frame that you're following these steps. Once you change branches over to Origin 3.5 or to whatever your stable version is, and give it a chance to finish checking out that branch and getting things changed over, there are a couple things that we need to do here. First thing is we need to run a command that's going to initialize the submodules that we didn't get as part of the recursive clone. And again, if we had done a recursive clone whenever we started the process, we still would have had to have done this step because we're changing branches. So we need to change directories into our PocketMine-MP directory, and then we're going to run this command: get space submodule space update space dash dash init space dash dash recursive. I'll include this and as well as all the other links from the things that we downloaded before in the description. So this command is going to get all of the submodules that we missed previously, as well as any of the ones that are specific for the 3.5 branch, and properly initialize all of those things. So when we run this command, you're going to see that it's going to grab a couple things from the PocketMine repository, particularly things like locale and some of the other resources that are needed. This isn't the only thing that we're going to have to do to get all of the resources that we need. There are a couple of other things. Remember earlier we downloaded copies of the PHP binary as well as the composer and PHP files, or I'm sorry, the DevTools files. So let's take a look at those real quick. Here you'll see I have the project repository, or the directory open. We're going to look in the PocketMine-MP directory. This is what you should currently have. We're going to add a couple of things to this. First, we're going to start with the PHP binary. Typically, most server installs are going to put their binary folder in their server folder. which is the same place that we're putting it. You don't have to do this, but it's easier to remember that it's there because that's part of the standard install method. Then we'll go back to our downloads and copy over composer.var into our bin folder that we just copied over. This will be important in a couple of minutes because Composer is going to install some additional dependencies that are not part of the recursive clone process. It's important to take note of the other directories that you have in your bin folder, because depending on whether you're on Linux or Mac OS or Windows, this is going to be slightly different. Finding your executable for PHP is going to be important because we're going to set that up here in just a minute. There's one more thing that we need to do. We need to add a plugins folder. PocketMine would normally generate this for us, but we need to go ahead and move our DevTools plugin into that folder. So we're going to create a new folder, call this plugins, all lowercase, and then copy over into that folder DevTools. Once you've got that, go back to your PocketMine folder, and we're going to go back to PhpStorm. We can take a look in our project files and see that the plugins folder that we added and the bin folder have been successfully added with Composer and DevTools. Some of the things that we're going to do from this point forward are significantly different from the previous install methods that I had demonstrated. We've already done a few things that are slightly different, but this is going to be significantly different. Previously, we would use the terminal to start the server and do everything from the terminal. Because of some changes in how the start scripts work and the fact that they will no longer load PocketMine from source on their own, we're going to modify our environment to do a lot of that for us. So, first thing that we need to do is set up our version of PHP. Click File, go to Settings, and from here we're going to choose Languages and Frameworks. On the right hand side you can select PHP. There are two significant changes we're making here. One is the PHP language level. This we're going to change to 7.2 because that's the language level that PocketMine uses. This will ensure the fact that all of the errors that we're getting are accurate to the version that we're using. If you stay on a version like 5.6, you'll get errors that aren't exactly accurate to the version of PHP that you're currently working with. Then under CLI interpreter, it probably has no interpreter listed. We're going to click the dots next to that and the plus sign in the top left hand corner. Here we're going to choose Local Path to Interpreter. You can change this name to whatever you like. I'm going to call mine PHP-PocketMine. And then for the PHP executable line, click the dots next to this, and we're going to find the PHP executable that we put in our bin folder. So under the PocketMine-MP folder, we put it in our bin folder. And then under the bin folder, find your executable. For Windows, this is going to be in the PHP folder at php.exe. Click OK once you've selected your executable. It should automatically recognize what version of PHP that you have, and it'll tell you where your configuration file is. For Windows, you need to click Open in Editor because there's something that we need to change here. You won't see this happen right away, so click Apply, then OK. Then on your Settings window, click Apply and OK. You'll see in your editor the php.ini file is open. For Windows users, the last three extensions need to be enabled. To do this, delete the semicolon that's at the beginning of each line, and this will enable the GD2 extension, the MySQLi extension, and the SQLite 3 extension. These extensions are important because there are several other plugins that you may interface with at some point, or that you may need for something that you're currently working on that will require the ability to use databases or possibly the GD2 extension itself. If you go ahead and enable these now, it saves you the headache of running into errors because these aren't enabled later on. Once you have those changed, click the Save button and you can close the php.ini file. Now that we have PhpStorm set up to use the binary that we downloaded from Jenkins, we need to set up a configuration that will run the server for us from inside the environment. There are two ways that you can do this. One is to click Run up at the top and then choose Edit Configurations, or on your toolbar is this little drop-down box. It's usually right beside your Play and your Debug buttons. If you click this box, the Edit Configurations option should be there as well. Click the plus sign in the top left-hand corner of the window that comes up and select PhpScript. From here, change the name to something you can remember, and then where your file option is, we're going to click here and look in the project folder under PocketMine-MP, the source folder, the PocketMine folder inside of source, and then look for PocketMine.php. The next thing that we need to change is our custom working directory. So if we click the dots next to it, we're going to change this to the PocketMine-MP folder. The reason that we're doing this is the same working directory that server owners are typically going to be using for their normal setups. This ensures the fact that your environment is going to accurately simulate what most server owners are going to be dealing with on a regular basis. Once you've selected those, click Apply, then click OK. The last thing that we need to do before attempting to test our environment is to install all of the dependencies through Composer. To do this, we go to our terminal. You should still be in the PocketMine-MP folder. If not, you need to navigate back to that point. We're going to execute our Composer file by using our pre-built binary. This should be in bin/php/php.exe if you're using Windows. This will be slightly different if you're using Mac OS or Linux. After that, put a space, then bin/composer.var, space install, and press enter. Composer at this point should recognize the composer.json and composer.lock files that are part of the PocketMine source code and install all of the dependencies necessary for PocketMine on the branch that you have selected. Once this is finished, we're ready to test our server and run for the first time. There are some things to take significant note of. If you set your configuration up properly and the binary for PHP was properly set up as well, then what should happen is that whenever we click the plus button or we choose Run from our Run menu, inside of the PocketMine-MP folder, we should get a couple of files that are going to show up. What we're looking for is server.properties, PocketMine.yml, and possibly a server.log. We're going to get an error during this process, whether we use the standard setup wizard or not. Click Run. This is going to start the setup wizard for the first time. Choose your language, and then make sure to accept the license. I'm going to skip the setup wizard because it doesn't matter what we do at this point, you're still going to get an error, particularly that you are running a PocketMine-MP development build, but your configuration does not permit running development builds. So, we're going to close our run dialog and we're going to fix this problem. To fix this, you have to open your PocketMine.yml file and change Enable Dev Builds to True. Once you have that, save the file, close it, and just before we run again, I want to point out the fact that this also created the Players folder, the Worlds folder, your PocketMine.yml, server.log, and server.properties. Click Run again, and this time, instead of getting an issue show up or some kind of an error, you should get a standard server run for the beginning. If this is the first time that you've run this in the project folder, you're probably going to get a notice from Windows that something is trying to access your network, and it's going to prompt you about your firewall. I would suggest selecting that you want to allow this network traffic to go through on public and private networks, especially if you use a laptop to write your code. It ensures the fact that you don't run into problems while you're doing your development work if you're on a public Wi-Fi hotspot. At this point, the majority of our environment is set up. We've got one more thing that we need to cover, and then we're pretty much ready to kind of go and handle all of our regular plugin development. One of the things that was important about this setup was the fact that we used DevTools to enable the ability for us to load our plugins from source. Some of the other advantages of having DevTools installed as part of our environment is the fact that we can generate skeleton plugin files and package our plugins to be ready for usage on a server. So to give you an example, and some of the things that kind of go along with this, we're going to go ahead and generate a plugin. The command for this is gen plugin, then the name of the plugin, and the author. Once you run this command, stop the server, and if you take a look in your plugins folder, you'll find the source code that was added, including a plugin.yml that's already generated for you with plenty of commentation that should help you to edit and modify this file as you need. This is only one way of doing this, but the fact that it's already here is very helpful for some new developers and even for some developers who are already experienced. Some other issues that may creep up along the way is that once you start packaging your own plugins, we can see here that our test plugin loaded, enabled, and properly executed the Hello World as part of the test plugin. We can package this plugin to be ready for a regular server environment by using the command make plugin and then the name of the plugin itself. And a packaged copy of the plugin will be put in our plugin data folder in the DevTools subfolder. We're going to stop the server and take a look at this. We're also going to look at one of the errors that this creates. So in our plugin data, under DevTools, here is our packaged plugin ready to be used on a standard server. But if we take a look in our original source code now, we're getting an error on a couple of different things, particularly on the declaration of class main, and that this already exists, or another declaration of this already exists somewhere else. This happens because PhpStorm is looking in the plugin data folder for other libraries that we may be using. So we want to tell it not to do that. Click File, Settings, and then in your Directories options, look for the plugin data directory. Choose Excluded at the top, then Apply and OK, and we'll see that this error goes away. For the most part, this covers everything that you need for a working development environment. With this setup, you can continue to generate additional plugins, add plugins that already exist for you to be able to test with, and write your own plugins that will have some interface back and forth with other plugins and see how all of those things work together inside of this environment while having a working copy that can go back and forth. The last thing that's significant is that whenever you run this, you may want to test it with your own copy of Minecraft. If you're doing this from Windows 10, then you're going to run into a very specific issue. Windows has built-in protection against trying to loop back on top of itself. So we need to create an exemption for Minecraft and Minecraft servers. To do this, we're going to use a command that was provided by Nicholas Olofsson in Minet. If we take a look at his wiki, under Getting Started, he has provided some troubleshooting steps for connecting to a local server on Minecraft for Windows 10. Specifically, we're going to run this command in PowerShell. I'll include a link for this wiki so that you can find this command yourself. But we're going to copy this, and then we're going to open PowerShell. To do that, click Start, scroll down to Windows, and look for PowerShell. Right-click on PowerShell and select Run as Administrator. Select Yes. You're going to get a PowerShell window that looks like this. And if you just make sure to copy the command and then right-click into the PowerShell window, it will paste that. You should run it and get an OK message at the end. You only need to do this once. It doesn't have to be done every time you set the environment up. Once it's run on the machine the first time, unless you reinstall Windows, you shouldn't have to run this command again. Now, whenever you run your environment inside of PhpStorm, You should also be able to connect to it with Minecraft Windows 10 Edition. So we check under our friends, and here we have a PocketMine server running. And if we watch our console, we can see that our Minecraft Windows 10 Edition is connecting to our server environment inside of PhpStorm. So, altogether, this should cover everything necessary to get you started. I'll create a couple of additional videos later on down the road that show some of the more advanced steps for creating additional projects and how to set those up so that they're either independent or to use your own files that already exist. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.